In the history of the heavyweight division, there are kings, there are brawlers, and then there is the glitch. The man who did what Mike Tyson, George Foreman, and Lennox Lewis never could. Conquer the light heavyweight throne as an undefeated knockout artist with a terrifying 100% finish rate, and then move up to become the first southpaw heavyweight champion in the history of the world. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a mathematical error in the boxing system. A left-handed anomaly that forced the world's most dangerous men to fight in a mirror they weren't prepared for. While others followed the standard blueprints of dominance, Moorer changed the physics of the fight entirely. But what happens when the man who broke boxing's ultimate glass ceiling simply walks away from the noise? Welcome to the 2026 world of Michael Lee Moorer. At 58 years old, the man they call Double M isn't chasing cameras, signing autographs at cheap conventions, or begging for Legends exhibition fights to pay off old debts. He is living a life of silent authority. He sits on a modest, protected legacy. As of 2026, his net worth is estimated between $100,000 and $1 million. A far cry from his $10 million peak in the 90s, but a fortune that represents something much rarer in the hurt business. Total, unfiltered peace. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into boxing's hidden empires. Most people remember him for one singular, crushing image. Lying on his back as a 45-year-old George Foreman pointed to the heavens, celebrating a miracle. It was a moment of televised vulnerability that unfortunately overshadowed a career defined by technical brilliance and surgical precision. But what they don't see is the man who was once arrested for breaking a police officer's jaw in an alcohol-fueled rage, only to undergo one of the most profound personal transformations in sports history. He traded the volatility of the streets for the stoicism of a man who no longer needs to prove his toughness to anyone. This is the story of the man who outboxed Evander Holyfield, survived his own inner demons, and built a life of dignity in a sport that usually leaves men with nothing but shadows, stuttered speech, and regrets. Let's get into the mind of Michael Moorer. Before the heavyweight glory, there was the light heavyweight terror. Born in Brooklyn but forged in the steel-town grit of Monessen, Pennsylvania, Moorer was a Scorpio defined by a quiet, brooding intensity that made opponents uncomfortable before a punch was even thrown. In 1988, he didn't just win fights. He erased people from the rankings with a cold, mechanical efficiency. Standing 6 feet 2 inches with a southpaw stance that felt like a geometric puzzle, he stormed the pro ranks with 22 consecutive knockouts, a statistical anomaly that earned him his reputation as the glitch. By 21, he was the WBO king, a perfect machine of violence that seemed impossible to decode. But even in his prime, the glitch didn't follow patterns, it broke them. Inside, however, the same intensity that made him a nightmare in the ring was beginning to bleed into his reality, creating a friction that threatened to burn his world down. He was winning in the ring, but he was slowly losing his grip on the man outside of it, struggling to reconcile the fame of a global champion with the temperament of a fighter who always felt like he was standing with his back against a wall. In 1991, he decided to corrupt the script entirely. He vacated his light heavyweight throne to enter the Shark Tank of the 90s heavyweight division, the most dangerous, high-stakes era in the history of the sport. Critics were ruthless. They claimed a blown-up 175-pounder couldn't handle the sheer kinetic energy and bone-crushing power of the heavyweight titans like Bo, Lewis, or Tyson. They expected him to be crushed by the literal weight of the division. He proved them wrong in 5 rounds against Burt Cooper, winning the heavyweight title in a brutal, back-and-forth war where both men tasted the canvas multiple times. It was a fight that proved the glitch didn't just have skill. He had the chin, the granite jaw, and the dark heart required to survive the deep water when the technical plan fell apart and only raw grit remained. Then came the night that changed the sport forever. April 22nd, 1994. Moorer stepped into the ring against the legendary Evander Holyfield. He wasn't just fighting a champion. He was fighting a century of boxing logic that said left-handers were destined to be bridesmaids, never the bride, in the heavyweight division. Holyfield wasn't just facing a challenger. He was facing a puzzle he couldn't solve, a rhythm he couldn't catch, and a jab that felt like a piston coming from an angle his muscle memory wasn't accustomed to defending. Moore outboxed the real deal over 12 grueling rounds, joining an elite, near-impossible pantheon of legends like Roy Jones Jr. and Michael Spinks, who successfully bridged the gap from light heavyweight to the ultimate throne. But as the multi-million-dollar purses piled up and the belts crowded his trophy case, the inner battle intensified. At his peak, he had everything a man could want: the money, the fame, the power, except control over his own spirit. The 1991 assault on a police officer was more than just a legal problem. It was a flashing red light for a man at war with his own shadow. He was a king on the outside, but a prisoner of his own temperament on the inside, walking the thin line between legendary greatness and a total personal breakdown that could have ended in a prison cell or a morgue. Then came the Foreman fight, the moment that defines his career for the casual fan, but shouldn't. For 9 rounds, Michael Moore was painting a masterpiece of pugilism: sharp jabs, controlled footwork, and complete tactical dominance over the aging George Foreman. He was dismantling a legend piece by piece, proving that age was no match for the Glitch's precision. But in Moore's corner, legendary trainer Teddy Atlas issued a chilling, prophetic warning: "You're standing right in front of him." Moore had become too comfortable in his dominance, forgetting that one mistake against a dinosaur can still lead to extinction. In the 10th round, the countdown hit 0. A short, deceptively heavy right hand from Foreman landed, and the knockout herd round the world stripped Moore of his undefeated streak and his titles in an instant. Most men would have let those 10 seconds define their entire existence, retreating into bitterness and living in a permanent state of what if. But the Glitch was resilient. He refused to be a mere footnote in Foreman's miracle. He returned to the lab, tightened his defense, and in 1996, he reclaimed the IBF title against Axel Schultz in Germany. He proved that while he could be knocked down, his internal code couldn't be permanently corrupted by a single loss. Today, in 2026, his lifestyle is a masterclass in quiet power. You won't find a fleet of Ferraris in his driveway or a parasitic entourage draining his bank accounts. While Mike Tyson spent millions on exotic symbols of status that eventually vanished into the ether, Moore's most famous vehicle was a signed Harley-Davidson he quietly sold at auction years ago. He didn't need the toys to validate his manhood. He understood that true strength is being able to stand alone without the props or the applause. His wealth in 2026 is old school, invested in his family, his 4 children, and his absolute hard-earned peace of mind. He has traded the spotlight for the sun rising over quiet streets. He spends his days at the Thompson Community Center, where he serves as coach. He isn't there as a celebrity relic looking for a paycheck. He's there as a genuine mentor, a survivor of the storm who actually made it to the other side. He uses the scars from his 1991 arrests and the lingering sting of the Foreman loss to teach at-risk youth a vital lesson: that the hardest punch you'll ever take isn't in a ring. It's the one life throws at you when you're not looking. He teaches them that discipline is the only shield against the chaos of the world, and that true victory is found in the character you build when no one is watching. As we stand here in 2026, we realize that Michael Moore wasn't just a southpaw anomaly in a right-handed world. He was the architect of his own second act, a feat arguably more impressive than his first. From a $10 million peak to the disciplined, humble reality of his retirement, he outlasted the temptations, the ego, and the self-destruction that destroyed so many others from the golden age of the heavyweights. In a sport built on deafening noise, empty hype, and the constant, desperate need for validation, the Glitch chose silence. And in the end, that silence might be his greatest victory of all. He proved that a southpaw can win the world, but more importantly, he proved that a man can find true, lasting wealth in the quiet life he builds long after the cheering stops, the crowds disperse, and the arena lights go dark. He didn't just survive the game. He figured out how to win at life on his own terms. Now, I want to hear from you. Was Michael Moore boxing's most underrated champion? Or is he the most forgotten great of the 90s? Is his quiet power, The ultimate blueprint for how retired athletes should handle their fame? Or does his reserved nature keep him from being ranked where he belongs among the all-time greats? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.